Hello, my name's John Thorne. I'm Sustainability Coordinator at the Glasgow School of Art, and it's my role to support students with issues in their practice around environmental and social justice. So Katie West has kindly invited me to talk briefly about issues of environmental and social justice within this project and looking at your local habitat. And for me, habitat really means any kind of space, from nation to city to street to building, to the room you might be in right now, to your wardrobe, to your desk, another item of furniture, and it really can be at any scale. And also efforts to challenge issues like climate change and biodiversity loss can be individual or they can be systematic. So I work a lot with students looking at systems change, but today we're also looking at individual actions you can take, and the UN's Act Now 10 actions. So hopefully that feeds into what you're looking at around habitat and assessing your own space, no matter what the scale is this time. So the Act Now UN actions are 10 simple actions you can take around your space, around your habitat, to actually tackle issues of global importance. So they're very simple, but perhaps using these issues can make us understand more about energy, about transport, about food, about resource use, and about how we live in this habitat that we live in, and also how we see life and how we react and relate to others as well. The problems we face are many, and climate change is just one of them. And Kate Raworth brought out Donut Economics, which is an easy read even for a non-economist. And it really looks at this sweet donut that we should live in, where if we use enough resources and we don't use too many, we live in a sweet spot, the donut, and we have enough housing, enough water, enough food. If we use too much, we fall out of the donut into things like climate change and land conversion issues, where we're sort of swapping forest for farmland, biodiversity loss. And if we don't use enough resources, then we don't have enough housing, water and food. So it's a really good one to look at. And the 10 actions are really seeing how we can live within our means and cut down on our resource use so we can still live comfortably. And that means for everyone. So it's also a social justice issue, and something COP26 we're looking at in November, hopefully, is not just environmental issues, but if we're going to change the planet and how humans live, it has to be across everyone and give everyone the same opportunity, and help places that are suffering at the moment from a lack of development and opportunity, actually bring them up and hopefully reduce the impact of what's happening in the global north, so we have less impact, especially on areas of the global south. So it's a complex, but it doesn't mean we can't take individual action. So why look at economic and social development within the curriculum? There's lots of reasons to do it, and if you're not an environmentalist particularly, but you may still have an interest in a social justice issue like race, queer studies, intersectional feminism, and they're all supported by societies at the GSA and also through my work as sustainability officer. There's just so many good reasons for doing this, and I work with Libby Anson, who you should talk to as well. She's the enterprise manager here at the GSA. Looking at these issues gives you a good appreciation of any future work or practice you might go into. Lots of good reasons to do it, lots of connections to your studies and how you're assessed, and hopefully better attainment and better work being produced as a result of looking at these issues, even if you're not specifically interested in environmentalism. So I'd encourage anyone to really consider these benefits of looking at environmentalism, and through this habitat, this first group project that you're doing is a chance to work across discipline and to solve these issues. We're not only going to have to look at environmentalism and social justice, but also look cross-issue. Interior designers are going to have to work with architects, sculptors are going to have to work with climate scientists, economists are going to have to work with artists. Everyone has to work together to actually explain these issues and get it out there. So this is a quote about psychogeography, which is included in your brief. And it's really, part of this is about how you feel in spaces and how they make you behave. So the obvious one is architecture is designed a lot by men, so you get a lot of male-oriented spaces, but also it's about design and who designs spaces and things and our habitats around us. So if you look around us, it may become apparent they're more designed by men perhaps. And what would it look like if more women and more queer people and maybe LGBT people design stuff or spaces or habitats, and that's another way you can look at this project. So I would encourage anyone, if possible and if restrictions allow, to get out and do things like forest bathing. And this is simply being in a space, a wooded space, and walking through it and being in the space and being of the space. And this person here, it's a Japanese process or origin, and you just be in the space. You're not going for a walk, you're not going for a hike, you're not climbing trees, you're not meditating particularly, but you're just being in the space. And perhaps you want to try being in your space right now and just not doing anything and just being of the space. And it's a little Zen as well if you want to look around that thinking as well. If you can, get out and walk in your local area and see what the city feels like in the present circumstances and what it might normally feel like. What do we want to go back to? So is this a chance? I'm not going to call it an opportunity because a lot of bad things have happened, but is this a chance to experience your space in new ways? And maybe we need to recreate spaces in new ways and have more greenery and less concrete and less cars. So should we be looking if cars are within the space of Glasgow? Do we need cars in Glasgow? Should we be growing food in spaces? If you could look at a city like Havana in Cuba, they've had to look at growing their own food because of the sanctions there and the blockades. Is that something that Glasgow could usefully do, and how would that benefit people socially, for example, if we started growing food in cities? There's different ways to explore, and Ben Locke lives in Melbourne, and he famously recently used his travel app to map out where he was cycling. So he was only allowed to go 5 kilometers from his house. So he decided to explore every single road within 5 kilometers, and he came up with this map of where he'd been cycling. It was something like 800 kilometers he did, and it took him weeks to do, but he explored and he found new spaces, new parks, new streets. Saw people at a distance he hadn't met before, but generally just explored the space in a new way. And Ben and his bicycle managed to get out. And that may be something, if you're a cyclist and your restrictions allow, then that's something you could look at as well, looking at your local area. Carl Jilg is an amazing artist, and he decided to show the spaces taken up by cars in cities, which are about 70% of cities, that is devoted to cars, where they drive, where they park, which aren't taken up by buildings. So he took that space away and put a hole in it, and that really shows what we give up to cars in the city, and should we be doing that? And in our habitat, should we be looking at maybe devoting cities to people and social spaces rather than cars? Josh Hoskins is a student at GSA, and he looked at materials around bicycles. So his work involved growing flax and using flax to make a bicycle. So instead of a steel frame and plastics, most of this bicycle is made out of something that's grown, something organic. And he was reinterpreting what the bicycle really meant in the way of reusing resources, and this would have been a lower resource impact than other ways of making a bicycle. So again, that helped him explore his local habitat and how he associated with it through the things he used to access it. Friends of Garnet Hill Green Spaces, any student can join this, and they've got a community garden on Garnet Hill Street, and we're also looking at places like Stowe for growing, but here there's a community garden up and running already. If you want to get outside when you can, look up frogs on Facebook and message them and see what they're up to at the moment. They're growing spaces. Hopefully we're going to get vegetables grown at Stowe. Maybe we're going to use that outside space more. But there's a chance to get involved with community gardening now on Garnet Hill. Again, that redefines how we relate to a space, and community gardens are really interesting. They're not protected spaces. They haven't got big, as you can see, it hasn't got a big wall around it. Anyone can go in it, and yet they're valued and used by the local community. I'm putting in a bit of Leonardo da Vinci here. This is one I came across the other day, and there's not really a title to it, but these are all the things in his life. So if you look around your habitat right now, your space, your room, how many things do you have? How many of them are sentimental? How many of them are practical? How many of them do you not really need? Perhaps there's clothing and items you haven't used for a year that could go on to someone else or get disposed of, or maybe you shouldn't have bought in the first place. And he just looked at all the things. When you look at this is the cacophony of stuff around him, and he just realized in his workshop when he was working away in his living space, he just had so much space. He just had so many things around him, and this really affected him enough to draw this picture of this rain of stuff coming down on top of him. So consider what you've got around you now, who made it, the social issues, the impacts of who made it. Maybe it wasn't that pretty, who made the clothing, who made the things, and should you perhaps look at that, those issues in the things you wear and the things you use. Jovana Rajovic was an architecture student here, and she came up with the idea of bacterial cellulose buildings. And this is the idea that buildings aren't permanent. So the building you're in at the moment is someday going to get knocked down and rebuilt and made into something else. And instead of using steel and glass, she said, well, we should grow buildings. So she came up with this idea of bacterial cellulose that could be molded and mushed up when the building was finished. So for example, Stowe buildings built on the site of another GSA building that was only there for 27 years. How long is, the Reed building. So how long is the Reed building going to be there? Maybe that's only going to be there for 30 years. And when that's knocked down, it's going to be a rubble of steel and concrete. Maybe buildings should be used in different ways. So you can look at the building you're in as well as your habitat. And also this goes back to fashion. Angela Carposi did a whole degree show work out of organic materials. So this isn't something that looks environmental. It's not crisp packets stapled together to make a dress. This is fantastic fashion. The degree show work, the culmination of all the time at GSA, but it happens to be organic and it happens to be ethical. She knew where everything came from. So again, does it have to look environmentally friendly? Does it have to look greeny and hippie, tree huggery to actually be environmental? Can we just say, well, everything should be like this? And fashion students and design students, every year in April, we have Fashion Revolution. And this is about individual choice and goes back to the UN Act Now actions where we're actually saying, well, how can individuals make a choice? And perhaps that doesn't have a huge impact, but that does lead on to maybe companies realizing that people care and actually making those changes themselves. So we start getting strategic corporate changes as well. So when you're looking at your habitat, small changes are made for the change itself, so you feel better and you're having less impact personally, but also you're looking to make a wider systems change as well. Karen Westland was a silversmith and jewelry student. She did a whole range for her degree show using ethical silver and gold. Again, these precious metals, like so many in the IT equipment you're using now, and also in her practice, don't come from pretty places. And should we be looking at that? Should we feel responsible for these items we're using, either highlight their use or try and change it? And she changed the whole practice and now makes a good living out of producing ethical gold and silver items like this beautiful goblet, which was her degree show work. And also looking at students like Rosie Giblin, who made a frontispiece for a canteen at the refugee camp in Calais. And this was her work at degree show. She won the prize that year, like Karen did. And she produced this work just to show people that this was happening and get people talking about Calais. Again, it was a personal action, but had wider systematic benefits. And again, she was looking at one action that carried forward into much bigger scale. But also you can get involved with things like energy saving. This is Condes students looking at how we might relate better and emotionally connect better to energy. And these students on the right were putting together work with Throwaway Gourmet, which when we go back to campus, hopefully students collect food that's going to waste and then bring it to the GSA and cook it and serve it as dinners. So we've had some fantastic dinners in the past few years with 70, 80 students sitting down for food cooked at the GSA that it would have otherwise gone to waste. So this is students taking personal action, but actually showing people that food was going to waste, and as well as saving the food, making that bigger statement that we need to think about the food we use and where it comes from. Beth Freeney on the left there, she did her degree show work weaving cushions and other items with plastic coated wire. So she found that plastic coated wire often gets landfilled, but this is copper covered with plastic. It's sometimes difficult to recycle. So she contacted local businesses and ended up dipping in skips and producing these beautiful cushions, which are hard wearing, and they just happen to be made out of plastic coated wire. Fantastic item there. And on the right, we also fund, as part of GSA Sustainability, the permaculture garden up at our Forest campus, and these students taking part in wellbeing exercises. Again, thinking about your habitat, I would say taking individual actions, getting out into the open when you can, doing gardening, doing something, planting flowers, whatever it is, growing your own vegetables. It feels amazing, and that actually allows you to do more in your own practice, whether that's connected to it or not. You just feel better. So these students are taking a break, they're doing their gardening, and some of them have actually done projects around the garden as well. So it all connects back to the subject area. This is Sofa for Life. So a few years ago, students came up with the idea that sofa, once it gets in the door of your house, it really plummets in value, and it's no use to anyone else. And yet people get tired of them, dump them on the pavement. get a new sofa, and their sofa, you could change the legs and the arms and the cushions and the covers, and basically keeps the same sofa, but it refreshes all the time. So again, this was an action they took looking at one particular issue in their really important thing in their habitat, the sofa, and they decided to do something about it. Also, the building you're in, is it made of steel and glass? It's probably made out of stone or brick. This is a cross-laminated timber CLT building, and it's several stories high, but it's just made out of timber. And this is the idea of taking timber and cross manufacturing it. So it's laying it across different angles, and this cross-laminated timber can be made in structures up to 12 stories high. And so we think about the actual building we're in. Does it need to be concrete and steel? Look around your locale. What are the buildings made out of? What can we do better? What can we do differently? What was the effect of building that building? How it's been made? And could we do it differently? Hempcrete, not a supporting material, but one for using filling walls. And again, this is made from something that grows. Hemp is an amazing material and something we should probably use more. And it can replace concrete, and one that's finished with, it can get safely landfilled or made into other hemp products. Also, your habitat is as much a social justice issue as an environmental, and as GSA, we very much link them. So perhaps you look around and the only people you see on the street are homeless people. So why do we have homeless people in a supposedly rich city in a rich country, and why do we have more and more of them? So you could look at those issues. And also we're looking at, when we're looking at sustainability, we're looking at feminist issues, gender issues, sexuality, because these all link back into environmentalism. When you start to look at it, they're all connected. So don't just think about environmental issues here, think about social justice, where your things come from, how your habitat is constructed, what's happening outside, what's happening on the street outside. This isn't something I've invented, or XR's invented, or anyone else. We're joining in rather late perhaps in something that's been going on with indigenous groups for centuries. Perhaps we can take about 500 years, the first years of discovery and exploration, but the stealing of resources, the building of empire, colonialism. So we're interested in decolonializing the curriculum, for example. We're interested in getting different voices in to GSA to actually talk about these issues, but this isn't something we've created. When you're looking at habitat, you're looking at a complex system of what's happened in history to get you there, going back 500 years at least of modern capitalism. We're also looking at social justice issues. So for example, if you use single-use plastic in your habitat, that single-use plastic probably came from fracking, fracked gas in America, and it's shipped over here. That fracked gas causes social problems. If you look at films like Gasland, it causes really big problems in America for families and for local communities, and it's just a nonsense product. It shouldn't exist. So how can we look at our habitat and perhaps take plastics out, take single-use plastics out? Above all, I would encourage you to tell a story. So we humans are natural storytellers, and hopefully today I'm telling you a story, but we need to gather, we need to connect, hopefully, when all this is over, and actually swap these discussions about issues and how to come up with solutions that solve environmental and social justice issues together. Maybe we want a future vision as well. So you look around your habitat, you look around your locale, maybe it's very urban, too many cars, too dirty, too polluted. What do we want to aim for? So could we aim for something in 50 years' time and say, this is where we want to be, and this is how we design, and this is how we build to get there? And do we need to vision and then work back? So maybe you're looking on a slightly bigger scale and saying, well, you know, this is what we would like the city to look like, or my locale, or my room, or my building. What would it look like in 50 years? How do we design our way there, and take it from that point of view? David Doran is a great artist who holds up pictures of what places could look like and what they do look like now. So again, reminding us of where we could be instead of this industrial capitalist complex which we have at the moment. It's important as well to remember your responsibility. So by all means, grab a banner and go down and go to a demo. I've done a few myself, but actually think about, as a specialist, as a professional in your practice and in your future work, what you can do yourself. But your responsibility is limited. There's 7.8 billion people in this world, and you're 1 in 7.8 billion. Your responsibility is 1 in 7.8 billion. So that means your responsibility is limited. Everyone can do something, but as a designer, as an architect, as an artist, you can perhaps communicate, emotionally connect us as an artist to things, design things better, build things better as an architect, think about the spaces, about how you can change things on a system scale, but actually you can change quite a small part of the system and still fulfill your responsibility. So this isn't something to weigh down on. It's also a balance. So using your IT today has an effect on the environment. Using the internet has an effect on the environment, but that's outweighed by you're fulfilling your small amount of responsibility in designing better, making better art, thinking about your future career and practice. So don't get stressed, basically. Think about your individual responsibility and realize it's actually quite small compared to the large issues. And it takes us back to the UN Act Now actions. By all means, limit your showers, turn your lights off, recycle, try and reuse stuff, produce food, eat locally. And that makes me feel better when I do these things. But I also realize those actions have to be taken out more widely into the systematic global issues that designers and artists and architects can tackle. And there's an app if you want to do the Act Now 10 issues now. And most of all, do get in contact. I'm available to meet students one-to-one. I can get involved with your project groups if you wish, so please contact me if you want more discussions. And I hope you enjoy the Habitat and what Katie West has put together for you. And it looks like an amazing project. And I really would like to see and perhaps publish some of the results on our website. So if you're proud of your work when you're finished, by all means contact me and we'll get some of your work up.